The morning sun was bright, but Daniel felt only darkness in his heart as he walked toward Lincoln High School. He was 15 years old, thin and quiet, with dark hair that fell over his eyes. He always walked with his head down, watching his old shoes move across the sidewalk. His backpack was worn and faded, and his clothes were clean but clearly not new. Daniel was the kind of boy that most people did not notice. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Daniel and his mother had moved to this city 6 months ago. Before that, they lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Life was simple there. His father had worked at a factory, and his mother stayed home. They did not have much money, but they were happy. Then the factory closed. His father lost his job. The bills piled up like mountains. His parents fought every night. Daniel would lie in his bed and cover his ears, but he could still hear the angry words through the thin walls. One night, his father packed a bag and left. He did not say goodbye to Daniel. Goodbye to Daniel. He just walked out the door and never came back. Daniel's mother cried for days. Then she wiped her tears, sold everything they owned, and moved them to the city to start over. She found a job, cleaning offices at night. It did not pay much, but it was enough to rent a tiny apartment in a poor neighborhood. Starting at a new school was hard for Daniel. He knew no one. He had no friends. The students at Lincoln High came from rich families. They wore expensive clothes and carried the newest phones. They looked at Daniel like he was something dirty on the bottom of their shoes. Some of them laughed at his old backpack. Others whispered about the holes in his sneakers. Daniel learned quickly that it was better to be invisible than to be noticed. Every day, Daniel followed the same routine. He arrived at school early to avoid the crowds. He sat in the back of every classroom. He ate his lunch alone in a corner of the cafeteria, always a sandwich his mother made the night before. He did not raise his hand in class. He did not talk to anyone. When the final bell rang, he walked straight home to his empty apartment and waited for his mother to return from work. But there was one thing that made Daniel different from other boys his age. One thing that lived deep inside him like a secret fire. Daniel loved music. Not just any music. He loved the piano. When he heard piano music, something inside him came alive. His heart would beat faster. His fingers would move without him telling them to. It was like the music spoke to him in a language only he could understand. This love came from his grandmother. Her name was Rose, and she had been a famous piano player when she was young. She had played in big concert halls in front of thousands of people. She had traveled to many countries, and her fingers had touched the keys of the finest pianos in the world. When she grew old, she moved in with Daniel's family. She was kind and gentle, with white hair and warm eyes that always smiled. Grandmother Rose saw something special in Daniel when he was just 5 years old. She sat him on her lap at her old piano and showed him how to play a simple song. Daniel learned it in minutes. His grandmother's eyes grew wide with surprise. She began teaching him every day after that. For 10 years, she shared everything she knew. She taught him about Mozart and Beethoven. She taught him about Chopin and Liszt. She taught him that music was not just about hitting the right notes. It was about feeling the music in your soul and letting it flow through your fingers. Daniel practiced for hours every day. His grandmother said he had a gift. She said his fingers were magic. By the time he was 12, Daniel could play pieces that even adult pianists found difficult. His grandmother would sit in her chair, close her eyes, and listen. Sometimes tears would roll down her wrinkled cheeks. She would say that Daniel played even better than she did at his age. But then, 2 years ago, Grandmother Rose got very sick. She spent her final weeks in a hospital bed. Daniel would sit beside her and hold her thin hand. On her last night, she looked at him with those warm eyes and whispered, "Promise me you will never stop playing. The music lives in you now, Let it out. Let the world hear what is in your heart. Daniel promised. Then his grandmother closed her eyes and never opened them again. After she died, something broke inside Daniel. He could not look at a piano without crying. Every note reminded him of her voice, her smile, her gentle hands guiding his fingers. When his father left and they had to sell everything, they also sold his grandmother's piano. Daniel watched strangers carry it out of their house. It felt like they were taking away a piece of his heart. Since then, Daniel had not played a single note. He had locked the music away deep inside him, along with all his memories of his grandmother. It was too painful. Every time he heard piano music, he would walk away. He told himself the part of his life was overdone at Lincoln High School. There was a beautiful grand piano in the music room. It was black and shiny, and it sat near a large window where sunlight made it glow. Daniel discovered it during his first week at the school. He would sometimes walk past the music room and stop. He would look through the glass window at that piano. His fingers would tingle. His heart would ache. But he never went inside. He just stood there, looking, remembering, hurting. One afternoon, Daniel stood at that window longer than usual. The hallway was empty. Everyone else was at lunch. He pressed his hand against the glass like he was trying to touch the piano through it. He did not know that someone was watching him. He did not see the tall man in the expensive suit standing at the end of the hallway. He did not notice the cruel smile that spread across that man's face. That man was Principal Morrison. And he had just found his next target. Daniel had no idea that his quiet, invisible life was about to change forever. He had no idea that the secret he kept buried inside him was about to be dragged into the light. And he had no idea that a simple piano was about to become the center of the biggest moment of his life. He just stood there, a sad boy looking at a beautiful piano, missing his grandmother and wishing things could be different. Principal Robert Morrison was a man who liked power. He liked the way students became quiet when he walked down the hallway. He liked how teachers would straighten their backs and smile nervously when he entered a room. He liked being the most important person in Lincoln High School. It made him feel big. It made him feel strong. It made him feel like a king in his own little kingdom. Principal Morrison was 52 years old. He had gray hair that he combed carefully every morning. He wore expensive suits that cost more than what Daniel's mother earned in a month. His shoes were always shiny, and a gold watch glittered on his wrist. He drove a fancy car and lived in a big house on the rich side of town. Everything about him screamed money and success, but underneath all that polish, Principal Morrison was not a good man. He did not become a principal because he loved children. He did not care about helping students learn and grow. He became a principal because he liked to control people. He liked to make rules that everyone had to follow. And most of all, he liked to show everyone that he was better than them. Principal Morrison had a special talent for finding weak students. He could spot them from far away, like a wolf spotting a lamb that had wandered from the herd. Students who were poor, students who were different, students who did not have anyone to protect them. These were the ones he enjoyed picking on the most. He would call them to his office for small mistakes. He would embarrass them in front of their classmates. He would make them feel small and worthless. The other teachers knew what he was doing, but none of them dared to stop him. Principal Morrison was friends with important people on the school board. He had connections with rich families who donated money to the school. Anyone who tried to challenge him would find themselves looking for a new job. So the teachers stayed quiet. They looked away when he bullied students. They pretended not to see the tears in young eyes. Principal Morrison's favorite weapon was humiliation. He believed that embarrassing someone in public was the best way to control them. He would often say things like, "Some students just need to learn their place." He thought poor students should be grateful just to be allowed in his school. He thought they should keep their heads down and never dream of being anything special. When Principal Morrison first noticed Daniel, something dark stirred inside him. He saw the old clothes. He saw the worn-out backpack. He saw a boy who walked alone with his head down. Most of all, he saw an easy target. A boy with no father. A boy with no friends. A boy who clearly came from a family with no money and no power. Perfect. For weeks, Principal Morrison watched Daniel. He learned his routine. He knew Daniel arrived early and left late. He knew Daniel sat alone at lunch. He knew Daniel was so quiet that most teachers barely remembered his name. But there was one thing that made Principal Morrison curious. He noticed that Daniel often stopped outside the music room. He noticed how Daniel looked at the piano through the window. He noticed the strange expression on Daniel's face, a mix of longing and pain. This gave Principal Morrison an idea. A cruel, twisted idea that made him smile. Every year, Lincoln High School held a big talent show. It was one of the most popular events of the year. Students would sing, dance, and perform in front of the entire school and their parents. The auditorium would be packed with hundreds of people. There were lights and cameras. Local news sometimes came to report on especially good performances. For talented students, it was a chance to shine. For those who failed, it was a nightmare they would never forget. Principal Morrison thought it would be funny to make Daniel perform at the talent show. He imagined this poor, quiet boy standing on stage with no idea what to do. He imagined the laughter of the crowd. He imagined Daniel's face turning red with shame. The thought made Principal Morrison almost giddy with excitement. He did not know that Daniel could actually play piano. He assumed that a boy from such a poor family would know nothing about music. In his mind, poor people did not have time for things like piano lessons. They were too busy just trying to survive. He thought Daniel stared at the piano because it was something beautiful he could never have. Like a hungry child looking at food through a restaurant window. Principal Morrison began planning his cruel joke carefully. He waited for the right moment. He wanted maximum embarrassment. He wanted everyone to see. He wanted to teach Daniel and all the other poor students that they did not belong in his school, that they should know their place and never try to rise above it. The talent show was 3 weeks away. Sign-ups had already started. Principal Morrison made an announcement that participation was highly encouraged. He said the school valued creativity and self-expression. His words sounded nice, but his eyes told a different story as they scanned the crowd, looking for Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel continued his quiet life. He went to class. He did his homework. He ate his lunches alone. He had no idea that the most powerful man in the school had set his sights on him. He had no idea that Principal Morrison had created a trap designed to destroy him in front of everyone. At home, Daniel's mother worked harder than ever. She left for work early and came back late. She was tired all the time, but she never complained. She always made sure Daniel had food to eat and clean clothes to wear. She always kissed his forehead before she left at night and told him she loved him. Daniel wished he could help her. He wished he could make money and take care of her. But he was just a boy, and there was nothing he could do except study hard and hope for a better future. Some nights, Daniel would lie awake thinking about his grandmother. He would remember her voice, her laugh, the way her fingers moved across the piano keys like dancing butterflies. He would remember her final words and the promise he had made. He felt guilty for not playing anymore. But every time he thought about touching a piano, the pain in his heart became too much to bear. Daniel did not know that his life was about to be turned upside down. He did not know that in just a few days, Principal Morrison would spring his trap. He did not know that he would be forced to face his biggest fear and his deepest pain in front of hundreds of people. He just continued walking through his days like a ghost. Invisible and alone, while a storm gathered around him that he could not see coming. Principal Morrison polished his gold watch and smiled at his reflection in the mirror. He was going to enjoy this very much. It was a Monday morning when Principal Morrison made his move. The entire school had gathered in the auditorium for a special assembly. Students filled the seats row after row. Teachers stood along the walls. The air buzzed with whispers and laughter as friends talked to each other. Daniel sat in the very back row, as far from the stage as possible. He wanted to disappear into the shadows, to be just another face in the crowd that no one would remember. Principal Morrison walked onto the stage with his usual confident stride. His expensive suit gleamed under the bright lights. He tapped the microphone twice, and the auditorium fell silent. Every eye turned to look at him. He smiled, showing his perfectly white teeth, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Good morning, students," he said in his deep voice. "As you all know, our annual talent show is coming up in 3 weeks. This is one of the most important events of our school year. It is a chance for our talented students to shine. It is a chance for us to come together as a community and celebrate creativity." Daniel was not really listening. He was thinking about the math test he had later that day. He was thinking about whether his mother had remembered to eat breakfast before going to bed. He was thinking about anything except what was happening on that stage. He had no idea that in just a few moments his name would be called. This year, Principal Morrison continued, "I want to do something special. I have noticed that some students in our school do not participate in activities. They stay in the shadows. They keep to themselves. I believe every student should have a chance to show what they can do." Some teachers exchanged worried glances. They knew that tone in the principal's voice. It was the same tone he used before he did something cruel. "I have been walking around our beautiful school," Principal Morrison said, "and I noticed something interesting. One of our students seems to have a great love for music. Every day, I see the student standing outside our music room, staring at our grand piano with such longing in his eyes." Daniel's heart stopped. A cold feeling spread through his body. No, it could not be. He was always so careful. He only looked at the piano when the hallway was empty. How did the principal know? "Daniel," Principal Morrison called out, looking directly at the back row. "Daniel, please stand up so everyone can see you." Hundreds of heads turned to look at Daniel. He felt like a deer caught in bright headlights. His face turned red. His hands started shaking. Slowly, on trembling legs, he stood up. He could hear students already starting to whisper and giggle. "There he is," Principal Morrison said with fake warmth. "Daniel has only been at our school for a few months, but I've been watching him. I can tell he has a deep passion for the piano. So I have decided to give him a wonderful opportunity." Daniel wanted to run. He wanted to disappear through the floor. He wanted to wake up and find that this was all just a bad dream. But his feet were frozen to the ground. "Daniel," the principal announced loudly, "will perform a piano piece at our talent show." The auditorium erupted. Some students laughed openly. Others gasped in surprise. A few cruel voices shouted things like, "This should be good," and "Get ready for a disaster." Daniel felt tears burning in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him cry. "But, sir," Daniel managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper, "I did not sign up for the talent show." "No need to be modest," Principal Morrison replied with a cruel smile. "I am signing you up personally. Consider it an honor. Not every student gets chosen by the principal himself." Some teachers looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Hernandez." The music teacher raised his hand and said, "Principal Morrison, perhaps we should ask Daniel if he wants to participate. The talent show is supposed to be voluntary." Principal Morrison's eyes turned cold for a moment. He looked at Mr. Hernandez like a snake looking at a mouse. "Mr. Hernandez," he said smoothly. "I appreciate your concern, but I am the principal of this school. I know what is best for our students. Daniel will participate." End of discussion. Mr. Hernandez lowered his hand and said nothing more. No one else dared to speak up. "You may sit down now, Daniel," Principal Morrison said, waving his hand like Daniel was a servant being dismissed. "I look forward to your performance. I am sure it will be memorable." Daniel sank back into his seat. His whole body was shaking. Around him, students were already making jokes. A boy in front of him turned around and laughed. "Hey, piano boy," he said. "Do you even know what a piano is? Or did you just want to sell it for money?" Daniel did not respond. He stared at his hands. The hands his grandmother had said were magic. Those hands had not touched a piano in 2 years. Those hands had made a promise they could not keep. Now those hands would have to perform in front of the whole school, in front of parents, maybe even in front of news cameras. And everyone expected him to fail. After the assembly, Daniel tried to sneak away, but a group of students blocked his path. They were led by a tall boy named Marcus, who was known for being a bully. Marcus came from a rich family and thought he owned the school. "Hey, charity case," Marcus said, pushing Daniel against a locker. "I heard you're going to play piano for us. That's hilarious. Do people like you even have pianos in your neighborhood? Or do you just bang on garbage cans?" The other students laughed. Daniel said nothing. He just stared at the ground and waited for it to be over. "Maybe we should help him practice," another boy suggested. "We could find him a toy piano. That's probably more his level." More laughter. More cruel words. Daniel felt each one like a punch to his stomach. But still, he did not respond. He had learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. Finally, the bell rang, and the bullies walked away, still laughing. Daniel was left alone in the hallway, his back against the cold metal locker. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks before he would have to stand on that stage and face his worst nightmare. He thought about pretending to be sick on the day of the talent show. He thought about running away from home. He thought about 100 different ways to escape. But deep down, he knew none of them would work. Principal Morrison would never let him off so easily. Then, like a soft whisper in his mind, he heard his grandmother's voice. "The music lives in you now. Let it out. Let the world hear what is in your heart." Daniel opened his eyes. For the first time in 2 years, a tiny flame of something flickered inside him. He did not know if it was courage or anger or desperation, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to begin. The days after the assembly were the worst days of Daniel's life. Before, he had been invisible. Now, he was famous for all the wrong reasons. Everywhere he went, students pointed at him and laughed. They called him Piano Boy, like it was an insult. They made jokes about his old clothes and his poor family. They asked him if he was going to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb" at the talent show, because that was probably the only song he knew. Principal Morrison had posted Daniel's name on a big board in the main hallway. It listed all the performers for the talent show. Next to each name was what they would be doing. Some students were singing pop songs. Others were doing dance routines. One girl was performing a magic show. And there, at the bottom of the list, was Daniel's name with the words "Piano Performance" written next to it. Every time Daniel walked past that board, he felt sick. Students would gather around it and laugh when they saw his name. Some took pictures with their phones and posted them online with cool captions. One boy even made a video pretending to play an invisible piano very badly while another boy held up a sign with Daniel's name on it. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. The worst was Marcus and his group of friends. They followed Daniel everywhere like hungry wolves. In the cafeteria, They would knock his lunch tray out of his hands. In the hallways, they would push him into lockers. In class, they would throw small pieces of paper at the back of his head. And always, they would mock him about the talent show. "Hey, piano boy," Marcus would say every single day. "How's the practice going? Did you learn Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star yet? That's probably too hard for someone like you." Daniel never responded. He just kept his head down and tried to survive each day. But inside, the shame and fear were eating him alive. He started having trouble sleeping. He could not focus on his homework. His grades, which had always been good, began to slip. The only thing he could think about was the talent show and how everyone expected him to fail. One afternoon, Daniel was sitting alone in a corner of the library when he heard voices nearby. It was Marcus and two of his friends talking about him. "My dad says the principal did this on purpose," one boy said. He said Principal Morrison loves to humiliate poor kids. It makes him feel powerful. "Whatever the reason, it's going to be hilarious," Marcus replied. "That loser probably doesn't even know which end of the piano to sit at. I'm going to record the whole thing and put it online. It'll get 1 million views. Maybe he'll cry on stage?" The third boy laughed. "That would make it even better." Daniel sat frozen behind the bookshelf, listening to every word. His hands curled into fists. He wanted to jump out and scream at them. He wanted to tell them that they were wrong about him. He wanted to tell them about his grandmother and all the years of training and the music that lived inside him. But he could not. The words were stuck in his throat like stones. That night, Daniel went home and sat in his small room. He looked at the wall where a picture of his grandmother hung. In the picture, she was young and beautiful, sitting at a grand piano in a concert hall. She was smiling at the camera with joy and pride in her eyes. Daniel remembered the day she gave him that picture. She said it was taken at the biggest concert of her life. She said she wanted him to have it so he would always remember that dreams can come true. "I'm sorry, Grandma," Daniel whispered to the picture. "I don't know if I can do this. Everyone wants me to fail, and I'm so scared." He lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling. He tried to remember how it felt to play the piano. He could still see his grandmother's hands in his mind, moving gracefully over the keys. He could still hear her voice telling him which notes to play. He could still feel the music flowing through him like a river. But it all seemed so far away now, like a dream from another life. His mother came home late that night, tired from her long shift. She found Daniel still awake, sitting at the kitchen table. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "You look like you have the whole world on your shoulders." Daniel looked at his mother. Her eyes were tired, but they were full of love. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her about the principal and the talent show and all the bullies who made his life miserable. But he saw how exhausted she was. She already had so many problems. He did not want to add to her worries. "Nothing, Mom," he said, forcing a small smile. "Just tired from school." His mother looked at him for a long moment. She knew her son. She knew he was hiding something. But she also knew that pushing him would only make him close up more. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" she said softly. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's what family does." Daniel nodded. His mother kissed his forehead and went to bed. Daniel sat alone in the quiet apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Somewhere far away, he could hear music playing. It sounded like a piano. He closed his eyes and let the distant music wash over him. Memories flooded back. His grandmother's hands guiding his. Her voice praising him when he played well. Her gentle corrections when he made mistakes. The way she would hum along when he played her favorite pieces. The way she cried with happiness when he finally mastered a difficult song. 2 weeks left until the talent show. 2 weeks until he would stand on that stage with everyone watching. 2 weeks until he would either prove them all wrong or become the laughingstock of the entire school. Daniel thought about giving up. He thought about begging Principal Morrison to let him out of it. He thought about pretending to break his hands. But then he looked at his grandmother's picture one more time, and something inside him shifted. She had believed in him. She had always believed in him. Even when everyone else thought he was just a poor boy from a small town, she saw something more. She saw magic in his fingers. She saw music in his soul. And she made him promise never to stop playing. Daniel had broken that promise for 2 years. Maybe it was time to keep it. To understand Daniel, you must first understand his grandmother. Rose Williams was not always an old woman in a small town. Once, she was one of the most famous piano players in the world. Her fingers created music that made people laugh and cry. Her concerts sold out in minutes. Critics called her a genius. But that was a long time ago, in a life that seemed almost like a fairy tale. Rose was born in a small village, the daughter of a poor farmer. Her family had nothing. They lived in a house with a leaking roof and ate simple meals of bread and soup. But in the corner of their small living room stood an old piano that had been left behind by the previous owners. It was broken and out of tune, but to little Rose, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She taught herself to play by listening to music on the radio and copying what she heard. By the time she was 8, she could play songs that grown-ups could not. A traveling music teacher heard her play one day and was so amazed that he offered to teach her for free. He said she had a gift from heaven. Rose practiced every day, sometimes for 8 or 10 hours. Her fingers would hurt so much that she could barely hold a spoon at dinner. But she never complained. She loved a piano more than anything else in the world. It was her escape from poverty. It was her ticket to a better life. When Rose was 17, she won a big competition in the capital city. The prize was a scholarship to study at a famous music school in Europe. She packed a small bag, said goodbye to her crying parents, and got on a plane for the first time in her life. She was scared and alone, but she was also full of hope and dreams. In Europe, Rose became a star. She studied with the best teachers. She performed in the greatest concert halls. Kings and queens came to hear her play. She traveled to countries she had only read about in books. She wore beautiful dresses and stayed in fancy hotels. Her name appeared in newspapers and magazines. Everyone wanted to meet the poor farmer's daughter who played piano like an angel. But fame and fortune did not change Rose. She remained humble and kind. She never forgot where she came from. She always remembered the leaking roof and the simple meals and the broken piano that started it all. She gave money to poor children who wanted to learn music. She visited hospitals and played for sick people. She used her gift not just for herself, but to bring joy to others. When she was 35, Rose fell in love with a kind man named Thomas. He was not rich or famous. He was a simple schoolteacher who loved books and quiet evenings at home. But he loved Rose for who she was, not for her talent or her fame. They got married and had one daughter who grew up to become Daniel's mother. Rose retired from performing to raise her family. She put away her concert dresses and her gold medals and her newspaper clippings. She became just another grandmother in a small town, baking cookies and telling stories to her grandchildren. Most people in town had no idea that the kind old lady who fed birds in the park was once a world-famous pianist. Then Daniel was born. From the moment Rose held him in her arms, she knew he was special. He had her eyes, the same deep brown eyes that could see music in everything. When he was just a baby, he would stop crying the moment he heard piano music. When he was 2, he would bang on the piano keys and laugh with delight. When he was 5, Rose sat him on her lap and showed him how to play a simple song. He learned it in 10 minutes. Rose knew immediately that Daniel had inherited her gift. His fingers were long and graceful, perfect for the piano. His ears could hear the difference between notes that sounded the same to everyone else. But more than that, he had something that could not be taught. He had music in his soul. He felt every note deep in his heart. When he played, it was not just sound coming from the piano. It was emotion, pure and raw and beautiful. Rose decided to teach Daniel everything she knew. Every day after school, they would sit at the piano together. She was a strict teacher. She demanded perfection. She made Daniel practice the same passage over and over until it was flawless. But she was also patient and loving. She knew when to push and when to encourage. She knew how to bring out the best in her talented grandson. Daniel learned fast. By the time he was 8, he was playing pieces meant for adults. By 10, he was playing pieces meant for professional pianists. By 12, Rose said he was better than she had been at that age. She talked about sending him to a music school, about helping him start a career, about watching him perform on the great stages of the world. But then Rose got sick. It started with small things, forgetting names and dates. Then it got worse. She became weak and tired. She could not sit at the piano for long without needing to rest. The doctor said she did not have much time left. Daniel spent every moment he could with her, soaking up her wisdom like a sponge soaking up water. On her last night, Rose held Daniel's hand and looked into his eyes. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. "You have a gift, my darling boy," she said. "A gift that is rare and precious. The music lives in you now. It is part of you, like your blood and your bones. Promise me you will never stop playing. Promise me you will share your gift with the world. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will let the music out." Daniel promised through his tears. He held his grandmother's hand until she took her last breath. And then she was gone, and a part of Daniel died with her. After the funeral, Daniel could not bring himself to play. Every time he touched the piano keys, he heard her voice and saw her face and felt her loss all over again. The music that once brought him joy now brought him only pain. He locked away his gift like a treasure in a chest and threw away the key. 2 years passed. Daniel grew older and quieter. He moved to a new city with his mother. He started at a new school where no one knew about his grandmother or his talent. He became invisible, a ghost walking through the halls, hiding from the world and from the music that still lived inside him. No one at Lincoln High School knew Daniel's secret. No one knew that the quiet boy with the old clothes was a piano genius. No one knew about the promise he made to his dying grandmother. And certainly, no one knew that when Principal Morrison forced Daniel to perform at the talent show, he was about to unleash something extraordinary. 1 week before the talent show, Daniel made a decision. He was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when the thought came to him like a flash of lightning. He could not stand on that stage and fail. He could not let Principal Morrison win. He could not give Marcus and all the other bullies the satisfaction of seeing him humiliated. But most of all, he could not break his promise to his grandmother again. If he was going to perform, he was going to perform properly. He was going to show everyone what he could really do. He was going to let the music out, just like his grandmother asked. But first, he needed to practice. And to practice, he needed a piano. Daniel knew there was no way he could use the piano at school. Principal Morrison would never allow it. The music room was always locked, and Daniel did not have a key. Besides, if Marcus or any of the other students saw him practicing, they would know he could actually play. They would ruin the surprise. Daniel thought about the problem for days. There was no piano in his apartment. There was no piano in his neighborhood. He had no money to rent practice time at a music studio. It seemed impossible. Then Daniel remembered something. A few blocks from his apartment, there was a small church. It was old and quiet, with stained glass windows and wooden doors that were always open. Daniel had walked past it many times on his way to school. Once, he had heard piano music coming from inside. It was not very good playing, probably someone practicing hymns for Sunday service. But that meant there was a piano inside. On a cold Wednesday night, Daniel put on his jacket and slipped out of the apartment. His mother was at work. The streets were dark and mostly empty. A few cars passed by, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Daniel walked quickly, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. The church was quiet when he arrived. A single light glowed in one of the windows. Daniel pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air smelled like old books and candle wax. Rows of wooden benches stretched toward a simple altar at the front. And there, tucked in a corner near a window, was an old upright piano. Daniel walked toward it slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might run away. The piano was brown and worn, with a few scratches on its surface. It was nothing like his grandmother's beautiful grand piano. But to Daniel, it was perfect. He sat down on the wooden bench and lifted the cover from the keys. They were yellowed with age, some of them chipped at the edges. Daniel placed his trembling fingers on the keys, but did not press down. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. 2 years. It had been 2 years since he last played. 2 years since he made that promise. 2 years of silence and pain and running away from the music that lived inside him. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his grandmother. He remembered her smile, her voice, the way she would nod with approval when he played well. He remembered her final words and the look in her eyes as she made him promise to never stop playing. Then, Daniel pressed his fingers down, and music filled the church. He started with something simple, a melody his grandmother had taught him when he was very young. His fingers were stiff at first, uncertain and slow. He made mistakes. He hit wrong notes, but he kept playing. And slowly, like a river breaking through a dam, the music began to flow. He moved to something harder, a piece by Chopin that his grandmother loved. His fingers remembered the notes, even though his mind had tried to forget them. They danced across the keys, up and down, fast and slow, bringing the music to life. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face, but he did not stop. He could not stop. The music had been locked inside him for too long, and now it was finally free. For an hour, Daniel played everything he could remember. Mozart, Beethoven, Liszt, Debussy. Each piece brought back memories of his grandmother. He could almost feel her sitting beside him, guiding his hands, whispering encouragement in his ear. The empty church filled with sounds that had not been heard in that place for many years. Beautiful, powerful, heartbreaking sounds. When Daniel finally stopped, his fingers ached and his face was wet with tears. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt alive. The heavy weight that had been pressing on his chest since his grandmother died had lifted, at least a little. The music had done what only music could do. It had healed something broken inside him. Daniel sat in the quiet church for a long time, just breathing and thinking. He knew now what he had to do. He could not hide anymore. He could not be invisible anymore. His grandmother had given him a gift, and he had wasted it for too long. It was time to share that gift with the world, just like she wanted. But Daniel also knew he needed to be smart. Principal Morrison expected him to fail. Everyone expected him to fail. If he was going to prove them wrong, he needed to do it spectacularly. He needed to play something so amazing, so difficult, so beautiful, that no one would ever doubt him again. He thought about what piece to play at the talent show. It had to be something special. Something that would shock everyone into silence. Something that would show them what he was really capable of. Then Daniel smiled. He knew exactly what to play. It was a piece called La Campanella by Franz Liszt. It was one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. Professional pianists spent years trying to master it. It required incredible speed, perfect precision, and fingers that could fly across the keys like lightning. His grandmother had taught him this piece when he was 13. She said it was the final test, the piece that separated good pianists from great ones. Daniel had practiced it for months until he could play it perfectly. It had been his grandmother's favorite piece to hear him play. She would close her eyes and smile as the notes filled the room like 1,000 tiny bells. For the rest of the week, Daniel came to the church every night. He practiced La Campanella until his fingers were sore and his eyes could barely stay open. He fixed mistakes he did not know he had. He added emotion and feeling to every note. He made the music his own. The old piano in the church was not perfect. Some of its keys stuck, and its sound was not as rich as a grand piano. But Daniel did not care. He practiced with everything he had, putting all his love and pain and hope into every note. The night before the talent show, Daniel played La Campanella one final time. When he finished, he looked up at the stained glass window above him. Moonlight streamed through it, painting colors on the floor. "I'm ready, Grandma," he whispered. "Tomorrow, I'll keep my promise." The morning of the talent show arrived with gray clouds and a cold wind. Daniel woke up early, before his alarm, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His stomach was tight with nerves. His hands felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. This was the day he had been preparing for. This was the day everything would change. Daniel got dressed slowly. He put on his cleanest clothes, a simple white shirt and dark pants. They were not new or fancy, but they were neat. He looked at himself in the small mirror by the door. He saw a thin boy with tired eyes and dark hair. He did not look like a piano genius. He looked like exactly what everyone thought he was, a poor kid who did not belong. But Daniel knew something they did not know. He knew what lived inside him. His mother was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She looked up when Daniel came in, and a smile crossed her tired face. "Big day today," she said. "The talent show, right?" Daniel nodded. He had finally told his mother about the talent show a few days ago. He did not tell her about Principal Morrison's cruelty or the bullying. He just said he was going to play piano. His mother had been surprised and happy. She knew about his grandmother's teaching, though she did not know how good Daniel had become. "I took the night off work," his mother said. "I'm going to come watch you." Daniel felt a mix of joy and fear. He wanted his mother there, but he was also scared of disappointing her if something went wrong. "Mom," he said quietly, "I haven't played in 2 years. I don't know if I'll be any good." His mother stood up and walked over to him. She put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. "Daniel," she said, "your grandmother was the most talented person I ever knew. And she always said you were even better than her. I don't know what happened between you and the piano. I know losing her was hard. But whatever you do today, I will be proud of you. You are my son, and I love you no matter what." Daniel hugged his mother tightly. He wished he could tell her everything. He wished he could explain about the promise he made to his grandmother, and the months of secret practice and the music that was bursting to come out. But all he could say was, "Thanks, Mom." At school, the atmosphere was electric. Everyone was talking about the talent show. Students who were performing walked around with nervous smiles. Teachers put up decorations in the hallways. A big banner near the front entrance read, "Lincoln High Talent Show tonight." Daniel moved through the crowds like a shadow. People who noticed him smirked and whispered. He heard his name mentioned along with words like disaster and embarrassment. Marcus and his friends walked past him, pretending to play air pianos badly while laughing loudly. Daniel ignored them all. He kept his head down and focused on getting through the day. The talent show was scheduled for 7 o'clock in the evening. Throughout the day, students were excused from class to practice on the stage. Daniel did not go. He did not want anyone to hear him play before the actual performance. Besides, he knew La Campanella by heart. He did not need more practice. He needed to stay calm. By 6 o'clock, the auditorium was already filling up. Parents arrived with flowers and cameras. Brothers and sisters ran up and down the aisles. Teachers directed people to their seats and tried to keep order. The energy in the room was high and excited. Everyone was looking forward to an evening of entertainment. Principal Morrison arrived at 6:30, wearing his finest suit. His shoes were so shiny they reflected the stage lights. He walked down the center aisle like a king entering his throne room, shaking hands with important parents and smiling his fake smile. When he reached the front row, he sat down in a reserved seat and crossed his legs comfortably. He had not forgotten about Daniel. In fact, Daniel was the highlight of his evening. He had placed Daniel last on the program, right at the end, so that his failure would be the final thing everyone remembered. He had even arranged for the school photographer to take pictures during Daniel's performance, capturing every moment of embarrassment. Principal Morrison took out his phone and checked that it was fully charged. He wanted to record Daniel's disaster himself. He imagined the video going viral, showing everyone what happened when a poor boy tried to pretend he was something special. The thought made him smile. Backstage, the performers gathered in a large room filled with mirrors and costume racks. Some students practiced their songs quietly. Others stretched for their dance routines. A few sat in corners, looking sick with nerves. Daniel found a quiet spot away from everyone else and sat down on a folding chair. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them, these hands that his grandmother had called magic. Tonight, they would either prove her right or let everyone down. A girl named Sarah, who was in Daniel's English class, walked over to him. She was one of the few students who had never been mean to him. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay? You look really pale." Daniel managed a small smile. "Just nervous," he said. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Me too. I'm singing fourth. My voice cracks when I get nervous. I'll probably sound like a broken radio." Despite his fear, Daniel appreciated her kindness. It was nice to talk to someone who was not making fun of him. "You'll do great," he said. Sarah smiled. "You too. I don't know if you can actually play piano or not, but no matter what happens, it's brave that you're doing this. Most people would have refused." Daniel did not know what to say. He just nodded as Sarah walked back to her group of friends. At 7 o'clock exactly, the lights in the auditorium dimmed. The crowd fell silent. A spotlight hit the stage, and the talent show host, a senior student named Jessica, walked out with a microphone. "Good evening, everyone," she said with a bright smile. "Welcome to the Lincoln High School Talent Show. We have an amazing lineup of performers for you tonight. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be entertained." The crowd cheered. The show began. One by one, students took the stage. A group of girls sang a popular song in perfect harmony. A boy performed a magic trick that made a rabbit appear from a hat. Twin brothers did a comedy routine that had everyone laughing. A girl played violin beautifully. Daniel watched from backstage, waiting for his turn. Each performance brought him closer to the moment of truth. His heart beat faster with every act that finished. His hands would not stop shaking, no matter how many times he wiped them on his pants. Finally, Jessica's voice echoed through the speakers. "And now, for our final performance of the evening." Daniel stood up. This was it. There was no turning back now. Jessica's voice rang out through the auditorium, clear and confident. "And now, for our final performance of the evening, please welcome Daniel to the stage. He will be performing a piano piece." There was no applause. Instead, a wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Daniel could hear people talking, even from backstage. Is that the poor kid? This should be interesting. Get your phone ready. This is going to be hilarious. Marcus and his friends in the audience were already laughing quietly, nudging each other with excitement. They had been waiting for this moment all night. Principal Morrison leaned forward in his seat, phone raised and ready to record. His eyes gleamed with cruel anticipation. Daniel's mother sat near the back of the auditorium. She did not understand why people were whispering. She did not know about the months of bullying or the principal's cruel plan. She just clasped her hands together and prayed that her son would be okay. Daniel walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him like a wave of heat. He blinked against the brightness, unable to see the audience clearly. But he could feel them. Hundreds of eyes staring at him. Hundreds of people waiting for him to fail. The silence was so heavy it seemed to press down on his shoulders. He walked slowly toward the grand piano at the center of the stage. His worn sneakers made small squeaking sounds on the polished wooden floor. Someone in the audience giggled at the sound. Daniel kept walking. He did not look at anyone. He kept his eyes fixed on the piano, the beautiful black grand piano that waited for him like an old friend. When he reached the piano, Daniel stopped for a moment. He looked at it properly for the first time. It was magnificent. So much bigger and grander than the old upright in the church. Its surface gleamed under the stage lights like black glass. The keys were perfect, white and pristine, waiting to be touched. Daniel sat down on the bench. He adjusted his position slightly, just as his grandmother had taught him. He placed his feet correctly on the pedals. He straightened his back and relaxed his shoulders. Every movement was precise and deliberate. The movements of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. In the audience, a few people noticed. Mr. Hernandez, the music teacher, tilted his head with curiosity. The way Daniel positioned himself at the piano was not the way an amateur would sit. It was the posture of a trained pianist, but most people did not notice. They were too busy preparing to laugh. Marcus had his phone out, recording. Principal Morrison was leaning so far forward in his seat that he was almost falling off. A smirk was plastered across his face. Daniel lifted his hands and placed them gently on the keys. He did not press down yet. He just let his fingers rest there, feeling the smooth ivory beneath his fingertips. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In his mind, he was not in the auditorium anymore. He was back in his grandmother's living room. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. His grandmother was sitting in her favorite chair, smiling at him. He could hear her voice as clearly as if she was right beside him. "Play for me, Daniel. Play what is in your heart." Daniel opened his eyes, and he began to play. The first notes of La Campanella rang out through the auditorium. They were soft and delicate, like tiny silver bells chiming in the distance. The sound was so pure, so beautiful, that several people in the audience immediately stopped whispering. Then Daniel's fingers started to move faster. The notes came quicker, tumbling over each other like water rushing over rocks. His left hand established a gentle rhythm while his right hand danced across the upper keys, creating a melody that seemed to sparkle in the air. Marcus's smirk faded. His phone trembled in his hand. Principal Morrison's mouth fell open. Throughout the auditorium, people who had been preparing to laugh found themselves frozen in shock. This was not the sound of a poor boy who did not know how to play. This was something else entirely. This was mastery. This was genius. Daniel played on, completely lost in the music. His fingers flew across the keys at impossible speeds, hitting every note with perfect precision. The melody soared and dipped, gentle one moment and powerful the next. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano, and Daniel was playing it as if it was as easy as breathing. Mr. Hernandez stood up from his seat. His eyes were wide with disbelief. In 30 years of teaching music, He had never seen anything like this. A 15-year-old boy, a student no one had ever noticed, was performing Liszt's La Campanella at a level that professional pianists would envy. Daniel's mother covered her mouth with both hands. Tears were streaming down her face. She had known her son was talented. His grandmother had always said so. But she never imagined this. She never dreamed he could create something so beautiful. The auditorium was completely silent except for the music. No one moved. No one whispered. No one laughed. Every single person was held captive by the sounds coming from the piano, sounds that seemed almost impossible, sounds that told a story of love and loss and hope. Daniel reached the most difficult part of the piece, a section where his right hand had to leap across the keyboard at lightning speed while his left hand maintained a steady rhythm below. It was the part that tripped up even the most experienced pianists. Daniel played it perfectly. His hands moved so fast they seemed to blur. Every note rang out clear and true. Principal Morrison had forgotten about his phone. It hung limply in his hand, recording nothing but his own stunned face. The cruel plan he had worked so hard to create was falling apart before his eyes. This boy, this poor boy he had tried to humiliate, was making him look like a fool. In the front row, a woman started to cry. In the middle section, a man who had played piano his whole life shook his head in amazement. In the back, students who had mocked Daniel for weeks sat frozen, unable to believe what they were seeing and hearing. The music filled every corner of the auditorium. It climbed up to the high ceiling and settled into every seat. It wrapped around every person like a warm blanket. It made them forget who they were and where they were. There was nothing but the music, nothing but this thin boy with the old clothes and the magic fingers. Nothing but the incredible sounds pouring from the black grand piano Daniel played on, unaware of the effect he was having. His eyes were closed again. He was not in the auditorium anymore. He was with his grandmother. He was keeping his promise. He was letting the music out, finally and completely, after 2 years of silence. And the music was more beautiful than anyone had ever imagined. The music continued to pour from the piano like water from a fountain. Daniel's fingers moved with a life of their own, guided by 10 years of training and 2 years of suppressed emotion. Every note carried meaning. Every chord told a story. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing something they would never forget. As Daniel played, memories flooded through his mind like a movie. He saw his grandmother teaching him his first scales. He saw her clapping with delight when he played his first full song. He saw the proud tears in her eyes when he mastered his first difficult piece. He saw her sitting in her hospital bed, weak and tired, making him promise to never stop playing. The music grew more intense. Daniel poured everything into it, all his grief and pain and loneliness. He thought about the father who had abandoned him. He thought about the students who had bullied him. He thought about the principal who had tried to destroy him. He let all of it flow through his fingers and into the keys. Then the music softened. It became gentle and tender, like a mother singing a lullaby to her child. Daniel thought about his mother, working so hard to give him a good life. He thought about her tired eyes and her warm hugs and the way she always told him she loved him no matter what. He thought about the sacrifices she made every single day so that he could have a chance at a better future. The audience was completely entranced. People who had come expecting to see a disaster were instead witnessing a miracle. Some of them had tears rolling down their cheeks without even knowing it. Others sat with their mouths open, unable to form words. The music had taken hold of them and would not let go. In his front row seat, Principal Morrison was no longer smiling. His face had turned pale, then red, then pale again. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles were white. This was not supposed to happen. This was not what he had planned. He had wanted to see a poor boy humiliated. Instead, he was watching that same poor boy create something more beautiful than anything he had ever heard. The music reached its final section. Daniel's fingers moved even faster, racing toward the climax of the piece. The notes cascaded like a waterfall, tumbling over each other in a rush of sound. Higher and higher the melody climbed, building tension with every measure. Then, with one final flourish, Daniel brought both hands down on the keys for the last chord. The sound rang out through the auditorium, full and rich and perfect. It echoed off the walls and the ceiling and the floor. It seemed to hang in the air for a long moment, as if the music did not want to end. And then there was silence. Complete and utter silence. Daniel sat at the piano, his hands still on the keys, his head bowed. He was breathing hard from the effort. His heart was pounding in his chest. He did not know what to expect. He did not dare to look up at the audience. 1 second passed. Then 2. Then 3. The silence stretched on, heavy and strange. Then someone in the back of the auditorium started to clap. It was Daniel's mother. She stood up from her seat, tears streaming down her face, and clapped as hard as she could. The sound echoed through the quiet auditorium like gunshots. Then Mr. Hernandez stood up and started clapping. Then the woman in the front row who had been crying. Then the man in the middle section who had played piano his whole life. One by one, people rose to their feet and joined the applause. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The applause was thunderous, like a storm breaking over the ocean. People cheered and whistled. They stamped their feet and shouted. The noise was so loud that it seemed to shake the walls. Daniel finally looked up. What he saw took his breath away. Hundreds of people standing and clapping for him. Hundreds of faces looking at him with amazement and admiration. People who had laughed at him, people who had mocked him, people who had expected him to fail. All of them were now applauding him like he was a hero. Sarah, the kind girl from backstage, was jumping up and down in her seat, clapping and cheering. The twins who had done the comedy routine were whistling loudly. Even some of the students who had bullied Daniel were clapping, their faces confused and embarrassed. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the crowd. His phone hung forgotten at his side. He stared at Daniel with an expression of complete shock. For the first time in his life, he had nothing mean to say. Principal Morrison did not stand. He did not clap. He sat in his front row seat like a statue, his face twisted with emotions he could not hide. Anger, humiliation, disbelief, all around him. Parents and teachers were celebrating Daniel's performance, and every cheer felt like a slap to his face. Daniel slowly stood up from the piano bench. His legs felt weak. The standing ovation continued, growing even louder. People were shouting his name. Some were still crying. A few tried to come toward the stage, but were held back by the crowd. Jessica, the talent show host, walked onto the stage with her microphone. She looked as shocked as everyone else. That was incredible, she said, her voice trembling. Daniel, that was absolutely incredible. The crowd cheered again. Daniel did not know what to do. He had never been the center of attention in his entire life. He had spent years trying to be invisible, trying to disappear into the background. Now everyone was looking at him, and he could not hide. He looked out at the audience and found his mother. She was standing in the back, still crying, her hands clasped together over her heart. She was looking at him with so much love and pride that Daniel felt tears welling up in his own eyes. Then Daniel did something he had not planned. He raised his eyes toward the ceiling, toward the sky, toward wherever his grandmother might be watching from. And he smiled. "I kept my promise, Grandma," he whispered, so quietly that no one else could hear. I let the music out. The standing ovation lasted for 7 full minutes. It was the longest ovation in the history of Lincoln High School's talent show. And when it finally ended, everyone knew that they had witnessed something truly special. Something that would be talked about for years to come. The poor, quiet boy with the old clothes had become a legend in a single evening. The morning after the talent show, Daniel woke up to a world that had completely changed. His phone, an old model his mother had bought secondhand, was buzzing with notifications. Messages from classmates he had never spoken to. Friend requests from people he had never met. Comments on a video he did not know existed. Someone in the audience had recorded his entire performance and posted it online. Overnight, the video had spread like wildfire. Thousands of people had watched it. Then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. By the time Daniel woke up, the video had been seen by over 1 million people, and the number was still growing. The comments were overwhelming. People from all over the world were praising his talent. Professional musicians expressed their amazement. Music schools asked about him. News stations wanted to interview him. A boy who had been invisible just days before was suddenly being called a genius, a prodigy, a star. Daniel did not know how to feel about all the attention. Part of him was happy that his grandmother's gift was finally being recognized. Part of him was scared that his quiet life was over forever. He sat on his bed, staring at his buzzing phone, trying to process everything that had happened. His mother came into his room with tears in her eyes and a newspaper in her hand. On the front page was a picture of Daniel at the piano, his fingers frozen in mid-movement, his face full of emotion. The headline read, "Local teen stuns audience with breathtaking piano performance." "I always knew you were special," his mother said, hugging him tightly. "Your grandmother knew it too. She would be so proud of you right now." At school that day, everything was different. Students who had ignored Daniel for months now wanted to be his friend. They crowded around him in the hallways, asking questions about his music and his training. Girls who had never looked at him twice were suddenly smiling and waving. Boys who had mocked him now nodded at him with respect. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Daniel later learned that he had stayed home sick, too embarrassed to face the boy he had bullied for so long. The other bullies avoided Daniel completely, walking the other way whenever they saw him coming. The cruelty that had defined Daniel's school life had vanished overnight, replaced by admiration and curiosity. Mr. Hernandez, the music teacher, found Daniel during lunch and sat down across from him in the cafeteria. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Daniel," he said, "I have been teaching music for 30 years. I have seen many talented students, but I have never, ever seen anyone play like you. Where did you learn? Who taught you?" Daniel told him about his grandmother. He told him about the years of training, the hours of practice, the promise he had made. Mr. Hernandez listened with growing amazement. "Daniel," Mr. Hernandez said when the story was finished, "you have a gift that most people can only dream of. I want to help you develop it. I want to connect you with people who can give you the opportunities you deserve. Would you let me do that?" Daniel nodded, unable to find words. In the weeks that followed, things moved quickly. Mr. Hernandez contacted his former colleagues at a prestigious music conservatory. They watched Daniel's video and immediately offered him a full scholarship to attend their summer program. If he did well there, they said, he could earn a spot in their full-time school, one of the best music schools in the country. Reporters came to interview Daniel and his mother. They told the story of the poor boy who had been forced to perform by a cruel principal, only to shock everyone with his incredible talent. The story touched hearts across the nation. People sent letters of support. Some even sent money to help Daniel and his mother. As for Principal Morrison, his cruelty did not go unnoticed. Parents who had witnessed his behavior at the talent show began asking questions. Why had he forced an unwilling student to perform? Why had he clearly expected and hoped for Daniel to fail? Why did he seem so upset when Daniel succeeded? An investigation was started. Teachers who had been too afraid to speak before finally came forward. They told stories of Principal Morrison bullying other students, of making fun of poor families, of using his power to hurt rather than help. The school board listened with growing horror. By the end of the school year, Principal Morrison had resigned. The official story was that he wanted to pursue other opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. His cruelty had finally caught up with him. He left Lincoln High School in disgrace, his reputation ruined, his power gone. Daniel did not celebrate the principal's downfall. He felt no joy in another person's suffering, even someone who had tried to hurt him. He simply focused on his music, practicing every day, preparing for the new chapter of his life that was about to begin. On the last day of school, the local community held a special ceremony for Daniel. They had raised money to buy him something his grandmother would have loved, a beautiful grand piano for his home. When Daniel saw it delivered to his small apartment, he cried for the first time since his grandmother's death. That evening, Daniel sat at his new piano and played. He played his grandmother's favorite songs. He played the pieces she had taught him. He played with all the love and gratitude in his heart, knowing that she was watching from somewhere above, smiling that warm smile he remembered so well. His mother sat in a chair nearby, listening. She did not understand music the way her mother had, but she understood love, and she could hear it in every note her son played. As the sun set outside the window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel finished his last piece and rested his hands on the keys. He looked at his grandmother's picture, which now hung above the piano in a place of honor. "Thank you, Grandma," he said softly. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for making me promise. I will never stop playing. I will carry your gift with me forever." Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang a beautiful song. Daniel smiled and began to play again. The quiet boy who had wanted to be invisible had found his voice. And that voice, expressed through the magic of his fingers and the keys of a piano, would go on to touch millions of lives in the years to come. But that is another story, for another time. This story ends here, with a boy and his piano, a promise kept, and a grandmother's love that would never die.